Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good morning to all my friends and colleagues around. I'm Azhar Md Noor, former Petronas Retiree. A Petronas Retiree. Okay, I've been told to talk about my, not to say my retiree life, my experience throughout working with Petronas. Okay, I shall start you with a story from my younger days until I retire from office. Okay, I started working with Petronas in 1977 after my MCE. My MCE was quite bad, so I had to ask myself. My father could not afford to spend me on study. I had to work myself. So I was lucky, Alhamdulillah. There was a job vacancy in Petronas. I applied. I got an interview and got a job on 1st December 1977. That was the early days of Petronas. So I started thinking, I cannot be like this all the time. I need to further my career. So I took HSC. Those days was Higher School Certificate. Now we call it Sijil Tinggi Persekolahan. So I got a good grades after 2 years. So I don't miss anything. My friends go to day school, I go to night school. So I think my boss at that time, Mrs. Kua Po Chu, a chief librarian, and also my manager, Encik Ibrahim Hassan, and also Datuk Wan Ismail, the executive director of management services at that time. He's in charge of human resource during the 80s. So I think Mrs. Kua Po Chu, being a Chinese, this is not racist. He finds that I have the potential to go further. So he asked me whether I want to go further studies in UITM, at that time ITM, to take library science or library school. Because at that time, entering library school, you need a HSC level entry. It's not an MCE. So my HSC was quite okay. He approached Datuk Wan Ismail, the former arwah, in fact arwah Datuk Wan Ismail, to push me to get a scholarship for Petronas. I think with the help of Encik Ibrahim Hassan, Mr. Kua Po Chu, and also Datuk Wan Ismail, I got a Petronas scholarship. I can say that I was the first non-executive Petronas staff who received a Petronas scholarship to further studies in a university. That time was 1980. 1980. I was lucky. I went to ITM for 3 years to pursue my library science and got my degree, that time diploma equivalent to degree. And I started working with Petronas as a librarian executive. At that time they call it management trainee executive in 1983. So I'm back to Petronas after a 3 years absence. So I think I have to pay a very much appreciation to three of my, it was a sentimental help from these three people. Mrs. Kua Po Chu, Encik Ibrahim Hassan, the former manager of Common Services Department, and arwah Datuk Wan Ismail, who have helped me to further my career in Petronas. So I started as a management executive, the library section at that time. It was under Common Services. And I was given a few projects to undergo. I think much earlier project at that time, if you think of 1980s, we are very popular in compiling bibliographies. So we compile bibliographies on the petroleum industry, right from the start of birth of oil industry in Malaysia until Petronas was born. I think it's quite a challenge being a new graduate. Having to go into this research. We went to Miri, we went to Sabah to travel to get documents so that we can cite a good bibliography at all. So my first publication in 1984 was the Malaysian petroleum industry backdating from 1902 until 1984. That was my first publication. We can call it a publication. We published it into a nice publication. I think that was my first achievement as a fresh graduate. I think overall I progressed over the years with Petronas. I became the senior executive. I was promoted to the head of section. I was promoted to the manager, and my last position in Petronas was a senior manager. I think in senior manager is a management position, considered little Napoleon, but still quite senior in terms of position. I think in Petronas, if you can see, there's a level of position in Petronas. You start with an executive, you move to the next level, senior executive, then the next level, manager, senior manager, general manager, senior general manager. If you are lucky enough, you got more rezeki, you can become the vice president. But I don't be like the vice president. So I retired as a senior manager of Petronas in 2014. I'm supposed to retire in 2013, but they extended my contract for 1 more year to be with Petronas. I officially retired on 19 April 2014. Okay, talking about my experience with Petronas. Talking about Petronas, it was a small organization in 1974. I've experienced it before. Because my first office was in Jalan Pudu. If you can recall, the first Petronas office was in Jalan Datuk On. That was the former Prime Minister's Department. Petronas Tompang lah pejabat Perdana Menteri tu. Then we moved to Jalan Pudu. Jalan Pudu was our first headquarters. We grew, I think it's a few hundred staff at that time when we were born in 1974. And now I think we have 100,000 employees all over the world, not only in Malaysia. So I think I can consider myself lucky with working with Petronas. You can consider Petronas as a university. I think considering working with Petronas is a learning experience, it's a challenge, and you can call Petronas itself after working so many years, like myself having to work with Petronas since 1977. It's a university by itself. You learn a lot of things in Petronas. People don't realize it. If you are given assignment, projects, challenges, you encounter challenges, problem solving, all that, these are learning points. You learn and unlearn in Petronas. I think in knowledge management, it's a good concept. You learn and unlearn, and also lessons learned from it can be shared among the younger generation. Okay, when I talk about Petronas early days, we grew as an organization which don't have many employees. Petronas started in Jalan Datuk On, if I can recall, a wooden house, a wooden department, tumpang pejabat Jabatan Perdana Menteri lah at that time, a small office. And then after a few period, we moved to Jalan Pudu. If you can recall, Jalan Pudu in Kuala Lumpur is near the Cathay Theatre. Panggung teater, panggung Cathay lah ataupun pavilion at that time. So we moved there. So that was our first building in Kuala Lumpur. I think a 6-story building, a 7-story plus the rooftop. A 7-story building, that was Petronas' first building. I worked there. And then I think Petronas have moved to various places. After Jalan Pudu, some of us moved to various places in Plaza Si Hoi Chan in Kuala Lumpur. Then some in Jalan Pekeliling. And we also moved to other areas like Complex Daya Bumi in 1985. And finally we got the Kuala Lumpur City Centre, which was our first headquarters. Not to say first headquarters, our modern headquarters. The tallest twin towers in the world, Petronas Twin Towers. Why I tell you about Petronas being a university by itself? Having to work with Petronas, my first assignment in 1984, immediately I was graduated, I was given a task to compile a bibliography on the history of the petroleum industry backdated from 1902 until 1984, until Petronas was born and after Petronas was born. We have to go to many places. We went to even to Miri, Sarawak, especially Sarawak Shell Lutong, to get earlier documents of the petroleum industry in Malaysia. You can find a lot of documents there in Sarawak Shell Lutong, because the first oil well in Malaysia was the Grand Old Lady in Miri. They call it the Grand Old Lady in Miri. I think started backdated in the 1900, the early 1900. Okay, I think my first publication with Petronas in 1984 was the petroleum industry, early petroleum industry in Malaysia, backdated from 1902 until 1984. That was my first publication. So having said that, I just want to share you some stories about some of my major assignments working with Petronas, and I feel proud and also feel satisfied about it. I think our younger generation can benefit from this story. Okay, I think one of the first major assignment that I was given was to set up the Perdana Leadership Foundation library in Putrajaya. I was quite terkejut jugalah, because why? At that time, I received a call from the secretary of our former chairman, Tan Sri Azizan, to come up and see him. I was thinking, what did I do wrong? What did the library do wrong until the chairman wanted to see me after lunch? So when I went to see him, he talked about a project in Putrajaya to develop a Perdana Leadership Foundation library to preserve the heritage of all Prime Ministers of Malaysia and from Tengku Abdul Rahman until Tun Mahathir at that time. It was as the Perdana Leadership Foundation was set up after Tun Mahathir retired from office in 2003. So in 2003. And our chairman at that time was also the chairman of the Perdana Leadership Foundation. Was also the chairman of the Perdana. He was given a task to set up the library, and he asked me as a Petronas staff to assist him in setting up the library. It was a challenge because having to work with VIPs, especially Tan Sri Azizan, Tan Sri Azman Hashim, Tan Sri Zeti, and you name it lah, all the big CEOs in multinational corporations, they are the board of directors of Perdana Leadership Foundation. And my first time having to deliver and present a paper on the concept of the library on Perdana Leadership Foundation to the board of directors comprising of VIPs. Mau tak gigil lah. Tapi I think we managed to went through. We did a lot of research on it. I think most of our recommendation was approved by the board of directors. And I think Arwah Tan Sri Azizan was very happy on our work as a library to set up the library. And even Tan Sri Azman Hashim, I recall, as the chairman of M-Bank, he was one of the board of directors of Perdana Leadership Foundation, pat me on the back and say, wow, macam consultant. You know, having very young working with Petronas, having to do research and present to VIPs. So I feel proud. I think librarians should be proud too, because you are meeting people who make decisions, like Tan Sri Zeti, and then having to work in Perdana Leadership Foundation library, having to meet Tun Dr. Mahathir. If he requested for some reference inquiry, he might approach the library or even call me to come and see him. I feel proud because we know that Tun Dr. Mahathir itself is a statesman. So I think when you meet him in person, it's a different character altogether. A good character, very humble, very polite, and I think very intellectual. So that was the experience Petronas gave me after working for so many years. It's not the money. It's the experience to establish something that can be the nation's history. So Petronas itself is not a business entity. I think having to sit, I think one of the motto, if you can recall, Petronas motto, energy received, energy return. I think this is one of the activities. You make more money, you return it back to the society. I think this is part of the corporate social responsibility. I think having retired, after pondering all this, this is what corporations like other big corporations, not only Petronas, should do. They make more money, they contribute more to the society. I think my second biggest project was within Petronas itself. After having set up the Perdana Leadership Foundation, I was also given a task to look into cost-cutting measures. You know lah, working in a library, having to handle online databases is a lot of money. And many operating units in Petronas spend a lot of money on electronic databases, especially Reuters, Bloomberg and whatnot. If I can recall, that cost about more than 15 million ringgit per annum Petronas spend. So we have to do a cost-cutting measure. I think with the rationalization project that we have undertaken with corporate planning, we managed to reduce almost 30% of the overall cost for Petronas. I think my first experience having to present the paper to the board, to the president of Petronas at that time, the MC they call it, the management committee. That was my second experience, having to meet big guns on Petronas to ask for decision on cost cutting. My first experience just now was with VIPs within multinational corporations, outside Petronas and within Petronas. Now is within Petronas. I think that gives a lot of experience for people like us working in resource center. We have to be prudent. We have to think that we are relevant in the organisation. We play a role in cost cutting, cost reduction. We play in a role in intellectual forum. We play a role in managing knowledge. We also play a role in making the company profitability increase due to the reference and information services that we provide to the users, the research that we provide to the users. Okay, having said that, I still recall some of the projects which I have undertaken. I think these two projects which I mentioned, these are the major ones. The Padang Leadership Foundation project with Tan Sri Azizan, and the second one is the cost cutting reduction for Petronas. Because Petronas have to look at cost rationalization for some of the spending. So library play a role on that. Okay, I'll continue on the Petronas culture now. Having working with Petronas for more than over 30 years, I should salute Petronas on this culture philosophy. I think if anybody, the younger generation of Petronas can recall the shared value, the Petronas shared value. I think it teaches all Petronas staff to be the best staff in the world through Petronas shared value. So talking about Petronas shared value in brief, I think some people who may be expert than me to talk about shared value, but I would speak my mind on shared value. Petronas shared values, there are 4 elements. Throughout my working with Petronas, I think this is the best philosophy Petronas have developed thus far in the early 2000s. I think it was launched by Tan Sri Azizan. The 4 Petronas shared value, we can call it CLIP, C-L-I-P. C is cohesiveness. L is loyalty to the corporation and nation. I, integrity. And P, professionalism. I think if these 4 components of culture practiced by Petronas staff over the years until now, you won't go wrong. Because all this CLIP thing, the cohesiveness, when you talk about cohesiveness in Petronas share value, you're talking about working as teams. I think that's what makes Petronas great. We are a team player, we work as team to ensure Petronas profitability increases. Staff development also is on the positive side. So I think cohesiveness is one main element, not only for Petronas. Working in any organisation, teamwork is a very most important element in any organisation. So Petronas make the right move by introducing the Petronas shared value. L, loyalty. I think loyalty to the corporation and nation is one most important element. Having to work in an organisation like Petronas, you need to be loyal. You cannot tikam Petronas dari belakang lah, somebody said. So I think you must be loyal to the corporation. Talk good things about Petronas to the public, because you are earning your salary with Petronas. You dapat rezeki dari Petronas. Takkan you nak cerita buruk tentang orang yang bagi you rezeki. I think you talk good things about Petronas in public. Kalau ada people talk about Petronas on the negative side, this is loyalty. And then you must be also loyal to Petronas to be fully committed in the work being assigned to you. No hanky-panky. I think loyalty means you must be loyal. Once you are loyal to the corporation and also to the nation, I think you will make a good staff out of it, working with Petronas. Another most important element, nowadays we are talking a lot on integrity. I think one of the most important component of Petronas shared value is integrity. Integrity is important. All work, tak kira lah, any work, project, assignment, you have to have a high level of integrity. I think with a high level of integrity, people outside or business partners within Petronas will trust on Petronas to do business. So I think integrity play a role. Even in the library world also, integrity play an important role in giving information services to the users. Integrity of the reference librarian is important, so that people can give you rated you as a good, credible staff who can give reliable information to the users. Integrity also play an important role in procurement aspect of the library. It's important that we manage the fund well, so that there's no negative talk about Petronas within the business circle. I think if you lack integrity, Petronas will have no trust among the public and also investor. And the last thing is professionalism. Remember, I talk about cohesiveness, I talk about loyalty, I talk about integrity, and last is professionalism. Professionalism is the last component of the Petronas shared value. Any work you do, you must build that professionalism in you. You must deliver work on a professional level so that people trust on your work. When I talk about trust, you have integrity, people will trust you. You have loyalty, people or your management or your bosses will trust you. You work as a team, the team will trust you. But when you deliver professional output to users, people will also trust you. I think the whole thing about Petronas shared value is about trust. The bosses trust the staff trust the boss, the management trust the subordinate, the public trust Petronas. I think it's all about trust. I think even our agama pun mention a lot of things on amalan hidup tanpa dosa. Maksudnya, I think Petronas shared value is something universally accepted. It's not something, tak kira lah you agama apa pun. I think if you practice this Petronas shared value, I think you don't go the wrong way working in an organization. So I feel proud with Petronas having to introduce Petronas shared value, and I hope this Petronas shared value is not buried. It should be made alive until today. I think those management around, if they see that this Petronas shared value can be enlivened, I think it will put trust on many people on Petronas activities, even among my community, the information professionals. So I think Petronas make a very good step on introducing Petronas shared value. Another thing is having to work with Petronas for so many years. I feel that Petronas introduction, at that time I'm still with Petronas. I do not know after retirement whether this thing is still around. The skill group development program is one also most important element to increase staff capability development through Petronas skill group. I was in charge of the Petronas librarianship skill group. I think Petronas put a lot of trust on the custodian of the skill group, especially custodian of each discipline. We have custodian for the petroleum engineering group, we have custodian for the finance group, and for the librarian also we have custodian for it. So I think Petronas do not leave any discipline behind. That's one thing good about Petronas. After working here for so long, every unit or every discipline or every activities of the staff are being accounted for. No one is left behind. I do not what others think of, but I feel proud working with Petronas and being loyal to Petronas. I worked with Petronas since 1970s until my retirement days. I don't go elsewhere. Even there are offers outside, I don't go. I still stick with Petronas because I think Petronas has done a lot of good to me, and I have to balas baiklah jasa Petronas through working. Okay, I talk so much. So I think I want to conclude and also touch another subject. But before I conclude, I need to also pesan pada staf Petronas sekarang, staf Petronas yang dah lama-lama kerja, dan juga diri saya sendiri. I think all staff are leaders on its own merit. So they are senior leaders like the president, CEO, chairman. They are small leaders like me, and also other personality. I think leadership play a role. Leadership play a big role in any organization, especially Petronas, one big multinational, international company. I learned 3 things about leadership. You may not find this in any management book, but these 3 things is important to carry you as good leaders or bad leaders. I think apart from the religious aspect, and in being a leader, you must be amanah, patanah and whatnot. But talk on the universal side, I think being a leader, you must be knowledgeable. Leaders must be knowledgeable. This is what Petronas taught me. I knowledgeable in the areas that I work with. An engineer who work with the geological department or whatnot must be someone is knowledgeable on the area of work. So I think knowledge plays an important role. A leader should be knowledgeable. Senang, because why? You must, when you are knowledgeable, you orang kata berilmu lah kan. I think banyak benda-benda mungkar you akan elak buat lah. Benda-benda yang tak elok. I think because you are knowledgeable, be it religious, spiritually or professionally. I think leader should be knowledgeable. I bagi contoh, kadang-kadang kalau you tengok di luar, some important leaders bila kena interview dengan wartawan on a particular subject, kadang-kadang dia tak jawab soalan tu, kata, nanti I will get back to you after consulting my officer. Some good leaders, they will jawab on the spot. They will jawab on the spot because they are knowledgeable on the subject. Some leaders who may not be knowledgeable, dia akan tangguh jawapan tu. Dia akan kata dia akan get back to the soalan. I think someone who is knowledgeable can be spot on and also doing good. I think second thing, being a leader, you must be a good strategist. Strategist. This is important. After having all the knowledge and whatnot, I think a good leader should be a strategist. Strategist in many ways. I am being the chief librarian of Petronas. I have my own strategy to make sure that library is relevant to Petronas. So various strategic development framework have been developed to make sure that we are relevant and we contribute to the business. Similarly to Petronas who are in the business department, they must be a good strategist to enable to develop good strategies to make sure Petronas on top of the world. We are the global champion. We are a global player. So a good strategist must remember that. I think the third thing I learned from Petronas, I think a leader should be able to predict the future. Ni bukan Tok Nujum, predict the future. Predict the future ni maksudnya kalau dari segi management ni macam a good scenario planning lah. You must be able to know that what will happen within these 5 or 10 years. 5 or 10 years. Macam itu hari I ada deliver a lecture on Industrial Relation 4.0. Siapa pun tak sangka taksi dah tak relevan dah. Sekarang kita ada Grab. Grab ni satu computer system developed by 2 orang yang very intelligent. Diorang tak punyai kereta pun. I think Grab take the opportunity of information technology. Yang siapa yang develop Grab ni, diorang tak ada taksi, tak ada apa pun. They work in the virtual world. Sekarang you can see many Grab drivers, million of Grab drivers around the world. And Grab is monopolizing the business. Siapa pun tak jangka. And then kita tengok sekarang, this is talking about the future lah. Because when I mention about good leaders must be able to predict the future, kita tengok electric cars sudah. Orang sekarang, I think teknologi electric car sekarang dah revolutionize. You never know, one day gasoline or petrol or diesel operated car dah no more relevant lah. So Petronas have to find new business lah. So they are looking at electric cars. I think electric cars is more environmental friendly and whatnot. So this is my thought. I think in the library world pun sama. Talking to all my librarian friends and also my information professional friends, they must not work in a cocoon. Maksudnya buat benda tu daripada day one sampai sekarang sama aja. Orang kata business as usual lah, BAU. They must be able to predict the future of what library can do or can produce impact and influence to society. And also to the corporation they work with. I think that impact and influence is one important element. So I learned 3 things in Petronas. I think if you can hold these 3 things apart from the Petronas shared value that I have told you, this is something, the 3 elements important for leadership. You must be knowledgeable, you must be a good strategist, you must be able to predict the future. Predict the future, scenario planning or sort of that.